Hey, it's Mike here. If you were ever to see my car, you would know I am not exactly Mr. Punctual about things like maintenance. I will forget about an oil change until that blinking light reminds me. So I guess Car Care to Go is designed for folks like me, and I suspect it's designed for a lot of the folks who listen to our show too. You make an appointment, they show up, pick up your ride, and bring it back a few hours later with the oil changed, the wipers replaced, and the seats tidied. They are accessible all over DC. Instead of sitting in a waiting room drinking bad coffee, why not sit at home and drink your own coffee while they do the work? Get your first synthetic oil change for just $20.23. Get it? That's 2023 with the code FIRST20. No catch. Any make or model. Sign up at carcaretogo.com.
Hey y'all, before we get into today's conversation, I have a small favor to ask. CityCast is surveying our listeners to help make CityCast DC a better and more useful podcast for you, the listener. It's super easy. All you gotta do is head to citycast.fm/survey. The whole thing is multiple choice and only 5 minutes long. I promise, we literally timed it. Full disclosure, we need 100 people to take it, so please be one of them. Again, that's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take it, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card. So that's pretty cool. citycast.fm/survey. Thank you. Today on CityCast DC, Moon Rabbit, the award-winning restaurant that was at the base of the Wharf's Intercontinental Hotel, closed down abruptly 2 weeks ago. The Washington Post reports that the shocking closure might have been the hotel's attempt to union bust the staff's labor organizing efforts. In the fallout, Chef Kevin Tian legally got ownership of the name Moon Rabbit and his recipes. I'm so excited to catch up with him while he searches for a new DC location, so you might hear some kitchen noises in the background. Today is Monday, June 5th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Kevin, thanks so much for being here. So I know that in DC specifically, we've seen a lot of this overlap of things like unionization and the restaurant space. Do you think that this is shaping the restaurant industry in DC as a whole?
I think the restaurant industry and the way like how the industry works needs like a huge overhaul to begin with. I'm not a fan of like the tip system. I think that's like based on a history of like racism, and that kind of like needs to get demolished. But a lot of this stuff can't happen overnight. I think a lot of restaurants are kind of like navigating how like the work culture is, and especially like the pay structure. And like, I don't think anyone has like the best way, but I think everyone's doing the best they can without much help from, unfortunately, the local government helping figure things out. They're like really leaving it in like the small business owners' hands to like figure out what the best way forward is. You know, and some places do really great. Some places are still figuring out. So there's always going to be a little bit of struggle. But I think at the end of the day, like working in the hospitality industry is extremely hard. And there's no reason why anybody working in the hospitality industry should be paid like what we call these like blue collar wages, right? Compared to like white collar work. I mean, like if anything, I think it's like way more demanding, deal with so many personalities and vendors and people. And a lot of the skill sets that you use in like your white collar jobs, you use them in restaurants. So I mean, everyone should be able to make like a good living to support themselves and their family.
Oh my gosh. As a former server, I can tell you that anybody who thinks that people who work in restaurants don't deserve a comfortable wage has never worked a lunch rush in their life. If I had to go back and do that today, I would be sobbing in the back. So yeah, it will never cease to be interesting to me who society has decided like doesn't deserve a comfortable wage, which is definitely not commiserate to like how hard they are working, because nobody busts their ass like folks in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, 100%. And, and I think everyone's kind of like moving in the right direction. There's definitely been a lot of articles and conversation about like service charges or no service charges and tipping and not tipping. But I think at the end of the day, like the general public just has to realize when you go out and eat, it needs to cost a lot more than it does now. I think the public just assumes like every business owner is like sitting on like a giant stack of money because they open a restaurant and they're rich or whatever. But I mean, that's not like the case. The margins are very small in restaurants, especially like very small, like independently owned restaurants. Like Everything needs to be more equitable between the front and the back of the house as well. You need to look at like the restaurant and the staff as a whole, and how do you raise everybody up, not just like one particular group in the restaurant, because that's still unfair to everybody.
Yeah. Do you think there's something about the restaurant industry where, from the customer perspective, perhaps the customer wants to feel like the owner is rich, everybody's being treated comfortably and well, that like there's a kind of fantasy that needs to exist to have a customer kind of have a certain kind of experience? There seems to be this sort of fantasy versus reality of what it actually looks like to own or work in a restaurant.
Some of the time there is like a really huge disconnect, right? I've worked on both sides, right? I've worked in 9 to 5. I've worked like greenbelt projects. I've worked like data analytics projects. I've done the presentations, and I've also worked in restaurants. And I'll say nothing is harder than working in a restaurant. Absolutely nothing. I think you can get frustrated in both types of jobs, but like there's nothing harder than working in a restaurant. I mean, there is other jobs that are way harder than working in a restaurant, but like if you want to compare the two, then restaurants are pretty tough.
So did you know about the Hamilton Live, which is the music venue, and it is right underneath the restaurant called the Hamilton. It's right by Metro Center, downtown, right by the White House. It is a place of live music, from pop to rock to blues to bluegrass to New Orleans jazz and jam bands. You can sit, you can stand, come early for dinner and a great show after. There is also in the room, there's like a standing area and high top tables, so you can actually watch and enjoy a drink and maybe even eat while you watch. This summer, they've got a bunch of shows they're excited about, including Keller Williams on August 3rd, Joan Osborne on August 5th, and Megan Maroney on September 23rd. You should check it out. Once again, that's the Hamilton Live, and if you are looking for it, just go to the Hamilton, which is a restaurant, and then go downstairs. The Hamilton Live.
You are now the official owner of Moon Rabbit. Can you tell us a bit about what might be next for the restaurant and how you're envisioning things?
Currently, in the moment, we're just taking time to find a new space for Moon Rabbit. I've been visiting a couple restaurant sites, which all have like its own like pros and cons. But in finding a new home, we just want to find a space that is not just perfect for like me and the team, but kind of like great for the community. Moon Rabbit became a space like that's more than just dining. Especially in the past year, we became a space for our community to gather, specifically the AAPI community. So I want to continue finding a home that kind of like meets those needs.
That sounds awesome. Are there parts of town or parts of the city that you would like that to be, or that feel right for you?
I would say there's like no particular part of town, but accessibility is like a big thing for me, right? I think for like good food, everyone's like willing to travel, but I definitely want to be somewhere central.
As you approach this search, are there things you're looking for in terms of the space itself? Like the old Moon Rabbit was in a hotel. Plenty of restaurant spaces are in residential buildings at the bottom of them. Are there pros and cons to sort of having it be a standalone storefront versus a storefront that's in a mixed-use building?
For me, not particularly. I'm very open, and I want to be as open as I can right now when exploring the different opportunities. So I'm really just kind of seeing what's out there. But I love like the neighborhood vibe. Himitsu was very neighborhood. Emily's before COVID was like a very neighborhood vibe. And I would love to go back to that.
So I know that one of the other projects that you kind of have cooking, no pun intended, but appreciated, is a nonprofit that you're looking to open in Anacostia.
Yeah, I haven't fully signed the lease on it yet, but I am in like talks of having a space open in right across the river from like Nats Park. It's called the Bridge District. I really like that space and that location. I think it's a shame that like Ward 8 and Ward 7 actually doesn't have access to like many grocery stores and like more food. I think everyone deserves access to like really great food. So for me, I'm kind of like fleshing out a business model to where like a lot of the stuff that you would prepare during the day, whether it's like stocks and sauces and like butchery, we would be able to provide that in like a grocery format as well. But also we'd use the same products to create like a restaurant for like lunch and dinner, right? At a very like affordable like price for everybody. And that way you can eat local, you can eat healthy, and we're there for everyone.
Where did the inspiration for this idea come from? Like, what inspired you to want to create something that's so accessible in Anacostia?
I think over the years, I've been like focusing a lot of like my culinary career about like through community work and activism and different nonprofits. And I just wanted to continue that. As far as like the neighborhood goes, there's literally a grocery store everywhere except for there. So that was kind of like the big reason for me to go there. I'm not the person that would like ever open a restaurant like downtown. That's just like not me. Like I was saying earlier, very like neighborhood and community oriented. That's just kind of like the vibe. I don't like being stuffy.
Yeah, we've done interviews about the specific experience of going downtown just to go to a restaurant and then going back home, and how oftentimes in that experience, there aren't many people who live downtown because it's not really that livable. And it's a different experience when you're going to your neighborhood spot. You're walking over to this place that you go to all the time where it feels like it's of the community. Is that really is that kind of what you're going for when you think about restaurant spaces?
Yeah, I think for me, like, I think there's a lot of restaurants where people would go to like once every couple months or like once a year for a special occasion. Like, I want our restaurant. Yeah, you can come to our restaurant for a special occasion, but I'd love to see you every week, right? Like, hey, I'm working on this new dish. Come try it out. Let me know what you think. Like, I love like talking to all our guests when they come in. And I think that's just like more of my style. I just like connecting with people. I think like the connection with food and people is like so important. And like food is such like a great connector to like others. And I want to continue kind of doing that.
Something that I find so interesting about your background is that you didn't necessarily have formal training. You didn't go to culinary school, and you were in DC working in like a pretty, quote, typical DC job before getting into the restaurant space. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. I didn't go to culinary school. I have like a finance degree, and then I also have like a master's in statistics. Went to pay for school. I always worked in restaurants, and then I moved to DC to do the 9 to 5. But I also worked in restaurants at the same time, like on the weekends, because I couldn't get away from it. It's something about the restaurant industry that I really love. And then one day I just decided to make like the full-time jump into restaurants. I did it when I was a lot younger. And I said, if I'm going to do it, I should do it while I'm in like my mid-20s. And if it doesn't work out, I can always go back and like do the 9 to 5. But it was something I had to do.
What did your family think of that jump?
Oh, everyone was probably scratching their head and wondering why I would give up. Like, I had a great job. It was like, I was making 6 digits, had a company car, had like the 401k, kind of like everything you'd want in a 9 to 5. But it wasn't something I was like necessarily like passionate about. I can only go into the office and look at a computer screen so much before I kind of like went stir crazy. But I just I love food. Food has been such a big part of my life, like growing up, right? Like it's always in the kitchen with family members, like doing like Sunday suppers. It's always a way to gather like your friends together and like share experiences. And I just wanted to continue like being around that kind of atmosphere.
What is the food scene in DC like specifically? Coming from California and then opening a restaurant in DC, are there things that are particular to the DC's food scene that make it a place where you want to be?
I moved to DC back in 2013, and I think the food scene was very different back then. There were a couple chefs that kind of like really controlled the food scene. Jose Andres, Michelle Richard, Richard Sandoval. And I think ever since 2013, the food scene has gotten like very diverse. I think, everyone had their neighborhoods where you go for like Ethiopian food, you always go to Falls Church for Vietnamese food. But I think you're seeing like a new generation of chefs, especially in the past like 5 years. They're cooking food that's very representative of like them and their like story. From Chef Angel at Anjou to you see Chef Paula Velez doing amazing stuff with her baking and pastries to, Michael Rafidi at Albi. I think it's like really great to see everything like actually change. Because for me, I think that food scene is more reflective of what like the food scene in America is than I guess whatever you see on House of Cards that everyone's eating. They're probably just eating like steak and potatoes on House of Cards.
Yeah, Frank's barbecue spot.
Yeah, for sure.
What other exciting things do you have coming down the timeline for you?
Right now, I'm going into 2 food halls. One is in the Heights in Chevy Chase with a concept called Doki Doki Sushi. And then I'm opening up like an Asian American barbecue spot at the Bryant Street Food Hall off of Rhode Island Metro called Doki Doki Barbecue. And I'm doing that in partnership with my friend Judy Beltrano. We met at Momofuku like years ago, like maybe 8 years ago. And we've always work together. And, I couldn't imagine like working with anybody else. So we're very excited to go into these food halls together and see where it takes us.
Kevin, is there anything that I did not ask you that you want to make sure gets included in this conversation?
I think I saw someone out there started like a GoFundMe for our Moon Rabbit staff. I think maybe if you guys could share the link, I encourage people to continue to support the staff through the GoFundMe. And then just keep a lookout on what we're all going to do next.
Thanks so much for being here, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
And before you go, here's some quick news. The National Park Service has just approved a plan to rebuild the walkway around the tidal basin 5 feet higher because of rising sea levels. Already, portions of the walkway frequently flood twice a day at high tide, causing erosion and harming our beloved cherry trees. NPS also plans to build seawalls in a way that they can be raised up even more if needed. Meanwhile, a group of 100 DC fire and EMS employees are suing the city for $100 million, saying it illegally deprived them of earned retirement benefits. They allege that after decades of service, they received almost no retirement benefits, and that the money was illegally used to purchase equipment instead. And lastly, elementary school teachers in Alexandria might be asked to work at multiple schools next year because of staffing shortages. Specifically, encore teachers of subjects like gym, music, and art are being asked to fill in at higher enrollment schools with more demand. Teachers opposed the change at a school board meeting last week, saying it's the worst thing that we can do for staff retention. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoy the show, why not tell your friend who loves Moon Rabbit? Tomorrow's episode is an exciting one, the first in our summer entertainment guide, which you'll all be hearing about a lot in the coming weeks. We're also doing it in our sister newsletter, Hey DC, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Talk to you soon.